Percents of change, a la Shmo. There's nothing Larry the Lobster loves more than playing his L-box after a long day of... wait, what is it lobsters do? Well, whatever they do. That's it, a long day of lobotomies. However, the new L-box controller has too many buttons, and Larry needs to buy the retro model again. Because Larry is a lobster. When the L-box was first introduced a few years ago, it was $249. But by now the price has been slashed to $199. What is the percent of the decrease? To find the formula, let's ask ourselves what we're looking for. We know the reduced price, which we call the price decrease, and we want to know what percent of the original price that is, which we'll call percent decrease. To find the percent decrease, we will need to divide the price decrease by the original price. First, let's find the price decrease, which is the original price minus the discounted price. 249 minus 199 equals 50. That's how much the price went down. Now let's plug in the numbers we know. Price decrease is 50, original price is 249. So this gives us our formula. Percent decrease equals 50 divided by 249. And that gives us 0.201. But we're looking for a percent. To convert it to a percent, just move the decimal point over 2 places to the right. So the percent decrease equals 20.1. Awesome. Despite Larry's lack of opposable thumbs, he can finally claw his way to beating The Legend of Zelda. Larry's math skills will be just fine, but we're still concerned about how he makes a living.
Hey guys, this is Mrs. Howard, and we're glad that you're joining us for another video from DMS Flipped Math. Today we're talking about percent of change. Sometimes you'll hear that percent of increase or percent of decrease. Percent of change just is a ratio that compares a new amount to an old or an original amount. If that amount increased, we have a percent of increase. If that amount decreased, we've got a percent of decrease. A recent example may be the fact that the new iPhone just came out. So you've got the iPhone 4S that probably sells with a new contract for $200. Well, the old iPhone, the iPhone 4, that used to sell for $200 is now only $100. And so we know that it decreased by $100, but we might want to know the percent that it decreased so that the manufacturer could figure out more about their sales. So let's go ahead and get into how we find percent of change. Alright, to find percent of change, the first thing that we've got to do is identify if the amount increased or decreased. So if the amount went up, obviously it's an increase. If the amount went down, obviously it's a decrease. And we're comparing that always to the original amount or where it started out. Then once we know whether it's an increase or decrease, we can use a simple formula where we place the amount of change, how much it changed, which we can find by subtracting the amounts, over the original amount. We know that a fraction or a ratio is just a division problem, so we're dividing those to find our percent of change. So let's get into a couple of examples. Here's our first example. We have an original of 15 and a new of 12. So what we want to do is compare the change in the amount to the original or where it started. Okay? So change we can find by subtracting our two amounts. So we're going to do 15 minus 12. And the original obviously here is pretty easy. 15. So this change, 15 minus 12 equals 3. Our original is still the 15. And from here we just need to kind of use our knowledge of how to change this fraction to a percent. And there's quite a few ways we can do that. We could just simplify. So 3 and 15 can both be divided by 3, which would be 1/5. If I want to, I can divide 1 by 5 and get a decimal, or I also know that both of these can be multiplied by 20 to get me a fraction out of 100 and give me 20%. Okay? And then of course I have to know whether that change is an increase or decrease. Well, my original is 15 and I went down to 12. So this is a 20% decrease. Alright, let's take a look at another example. I paid $20 for a new DVD 3 years ago. Yesterday, he paid $15 for a new DVD. Find the percent of change. So, we know we're looking for the change and the original. Easy. The change, 20 minus 15. Okay. The thing that we might have a little trouble with is identifying which one of those is the original. So Bill paid $20 for a new DVD 3 years ago. Yesterday was $15. Just think about which one came first. Did he pay the $20 first or the $15 first? Okay? And since the $20 is the one he paid first, that's going to be our original price that we're going to put on the bottom. Okay? So our amount of change, 20 minus 5, is a change of 5 over the original of 20, which can be simplified to 1/4, and we know that 1/4 is 25%. Again, identify whether it's an increase or a decrease. So since we started at 20 and we went down to 15, that means we've got a 25% decrease. Remember guys, if there's anything that you didn't get in the video, feel free to rewind, go back through, pause, make sure you understand the concept, and come to class ready to work tomorrow. Have a good night guys.
Hi, in this Math Motor video we're going to be taking a look at a percent increase. And anytime we talk about a change in percent or amount of change, we use this ratio form here, the amount of change over the original amount. So let's use an example to help you kind of understand how this process works. Let's say we're talking about a chicken coop, and on day 1 this chicken coop produces 45 eggs, and then we'll say on day 2 it produces 54. And you're the farmer, you want to know, well, how much of an increase was it to go from 45 eggs to 54 eggs? Well, we know, again, it's an increase, right? Our value went up. And so in order to find our amount of change, we can just find the difference using some simple subtraction over here. That gives us our amount of change. 14 minus 5 gives us that 9. So there was an increase of 9 eggs. So the question is, 9 is what percent of 45? Okay? So again, we write our amount of change, which was 9, over the original amount. And what the original amount was what we start with, right? So it was 45. Okay, so there's our ratio set up, our amount of change over our original amount. This is going to help us find out what our percent increase was, because we went up. We had an increase from 45 to 54. Okay, now how do we find our percent? Well, first we have to convert this ratio fraction form here to a decimal, and then from the decimal we can go to the percent.
Here's the formula that we're going to be using for this. Difference over original amount equals percent over 100. So this is right in line with all the other proportions we've been working on. We've done is over of equals percent over 100, part over whole equals percent over 100, and now we have difference over original amount. If you've ever seen the TV show The Biggest Loser, then you've seen percent of change. Because on The Biggest Loser, they don't just measure how much weight you've lost. They don't say you're the biggest winner because you've lost 100 pounds. They tell you your percent of weight loss. Right? So that it varies based upon your starting weight. You know, someone who weighs, 300 pounds when they start out is going to have to lose more weight than somebody who starts out at 200 pounds. So you can't just measure how much weight you've lost. You got to measure your percent of weight loss. So the example I have here says last week I weighed 230 pounds. This week I weigh 224 pounds. What is my percentage of weight loss? So difference, hopefully everyone knows that difference in terms of math means subtract. So we have two values, my weight from last week and my current weight. So the difference, I'm going to subtract 230 minus 224 to get 6. The original weight, or the starting weight, is what I weighed last week. That was 230 pounds, equals, we're trying to find percent in all these problems. Our x is always going to be above 100. So again, all we're doing for this is, for percent of change, is we're trying to find the difference between two numbers, and we put it over the original amount. So it's really as simple as just subtracting two numbers. And we want this number to be positive, It's always just going to subtract the biggest number minus the smallest number. And now, just like we've been doing in this entire chapter, we're going to do cross multiply, divide. So 6 times 100 divided by 230. Punching it in my calculator right now. And I got 2.61% if I round it to the hundredths. Now we have to add one other piece of information to our answer here. If I told you that your percent of weight change was 2.61%, you wouldn't know if you gained weight or lost weight. So we have to say whether this is an increase or a decrease. So last week I weighed 230. This week I weighed 224. So this is a decrease. The value went down. We have to add either increase or decrease to our answer. So the answer is a 2.61% decrease.
All right, there's one thing I want to make a note of before we move on to these trickier examples, and that's the connection between a positive answer and a percent of increase, and a negative answer and a percent of decrease. So in each of the 4 examples that we saw before, they found the amount of change by doing the big number minus the small number. I'm not always going to do that. Actually, in general, I'm going to use this. I'm going to do the new minus the original. The reason I'm going to do this is that's going to tell me exactly whether it's a percent of increase or decrease. The sign of this number, the new minus the original divided by the original, the sign of that is going to tell me whether it's a positive or a negative percent of change. Really, it's going to tell me whether it's a percent of increase or percent of decrease. You can use either way. As long as you read the question carefully, you should be able to decide whether it goes up or down, going from the original amount to the new amount. That's really what decides whether it's an increase or a decrease. Or you can use this formula and you know that the sign is going to tell you whether it's positive or negative decides whether it's an increase or a decrease. You also need to know that a negative percent of change represents a percent of decrease. All right, so we're going to see that in the next example. Right now we're just trying to find the percent of change from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. So on this graph, from 12 p.m., where there were 10 people in the store, to 1 p.m., where there are 22 people in the store, we want to find the percent of change. All right, so first off, we should be able to rule out some of these answers. I'm just going to look at the answers and rule out anything that I know is wrong. I know it's going up. It's going up from 10 to 22. It's not a percent of decrease. I can rule both of those out. You might even be able to guess at the answer from here, judging by how much this jumps up, but we're going to use this fraction to figure out the exact number. So our original amount is 10, and our new amount is 22. So that's what we're going to plug into here. It's 22 minus 10. That gives us 12 on top, divided by 10. That would give us 1.2. That's as a decimal. We want the percent of change, so we move the decimal place 2 places. It's 120%, and it's going up, so it's a percent of increase. And that makes sense. It's over doubling, which is a 100% increase. 100% increase would be just doubling this up to 20. It's doing a little bit more than that, so that percent increase makes sense. All right, our next example is really just checking for the next hour, going from 1 p.m., starting at this 22, going down to this 15. All right, so immediately you should see that that's going down. We can rule out some bad answers again. Anything that's positive, here we see -7 and -32. Those represent the percent decreases. That's a percent increase. That's a percent increase. So we can rule those two out because we see that this is going down. All right, we're going to use the exact same fraction as before. Our original number was 22. Our new number was 15. And again, we're going to just do the new minus the original to find the percent of change. That's going to tell me whether it was a percent of increase or decrease. But I should already be able to see from this graph or from a word problem whether it's going up or down. So we subtract those two. We do 15 minus 22. We'd get -7 on top divided by 22. That would give us that as a decimal. We don't want to keep it as a decimal because we want the percent of change, so we move the decimal place 2 places. That's -31.8%. I'm going to round that. That is about -32% or a 32% decrease. You want to be careful when you do this part in the calculator. If you just type this in directly, 15 minus 22 divided by 22. If you don't type in parentheses or anything, or you don't hit an equal sign or enter in between this part and the division, it's going to do the division. It's going to do the order of operations in the correct order. It's going to do the division before the subtraction. So you'll get the answer of 14. Make sure when you type this into the calculator, you do the subtraction, you hit equals, and then you divide by 22. The next example, we're going to be working backwards. Now we're going to be given the percent of change, and we need to figure out the new amount. So we're going to be given the original. In September, Jocelyn made $35 babysitting. When she compared her earnings from October, the next month, she calculated a 40% increase in earnings. So how much did she make in October? We know the original amount is 35, but we don't know the new amount. We know how much she made in September. We don't know how much she made in October. So this is really where the proportion is going to come in handy. The proportion in that last example, he used the amount of increase. Really, he talked about the difference compared to the percent of change. He's talking about the change, or the increase, compared to the percent of increase, or the percent of change. So we're able to set up this proportion. We're comparing the original to the 100 as 100%. This is the percent of change. The change just represented in percent form. That's this 40% that we are given here. And we know that the original amount is 35. So we're going to solve for this x. Again, that's just going to be the change. That's not really going to be our final answer. We want to figure out how much they're actually making in October. So when we solve that proportion, we figure out that the increase is 14. So she's making 14 more dollars. That's how much it went up in October. That means that she's going to make a total of $49 in October. That's $14 more than the 35 she made in September.